My name is Victoria Langford, and I am 25 years old. They said I would regret marrying a poor man. Tonight, they will regret ever underestimating me. The city stretches beneath my penthouse window like a jeweled map, millions of lights, all pulsing in silent worship of power. From this height, the traffic becomes veins of fire and the people tiny sparks. I raise a glass of wine and watch the crimson liquid shimmer against the skyline. It tastes like triumph and memory, sweet, heavy, almost cruel. I am calm now, colder than I have ever been. The higher you climb, the quieter the world becomes. Success does not shout, it hums, a low, steady sound that only those who have earned it can hear. And in that stillness, I prepare for the night of reckoning. In a few hours, the very people who once erased me will gather under chandeliers I own, toasting to an empire that belongs to me. They will not know it yet. They will smile and laugh, certain of their power, unaware that the floor beneath them is already cracking. I used to dream of this night. Now I have designed it. But before every empire rises, there is ruin. Mine began years ago, in a house of gold. Before the fall, I lived inside perfection, or what passed for it. My father, Charles Langford, built his fortune on control. My mother maintained it with grace sharpened into weaponry. Every corner of our mansion gleamed, every event sparkled with polished lies. We were the kind of family people envied from a distance and pitted up close. I was their only daughter, the perfect heir to a kingdom of appearances. My education was preordained, my friends selected, my future mapped out like a business plan. Love, in our home, was a currency measured by obedience. Then came Ethan Hale. He did not belong to our world. He was a scholarship student at my university, brilliant, poor, impossibly unrefined. His hands were rough from building machines instead of shaking them. He looked at me as if I were human, not porcelain. That was his first mistake. It became my salvation. We met behind the library under an old willow tree, a place no one from my circle ever visited. While others boasted about careers and trust funds, Ethan spoke about invention, creation, energy, possibility. He wanted to build something that could change the world. I wanted to feel something that was real. Together, we believed we could do both. I hid him at first. I thought I could keep two worlds apart, the glittering one my parents owned and the honest one I shared with him. But secrets rot when exposed to money. The truth came out one evening at dinner. My father's voice was calm when he asked, "Who is he?" My mother's hand was steady when she set down her glass. Mine trembled when I answered, "He is the man I love." Silence fell like a blade. My father leaned back, his expression carved in marble. "He has nothing, Victoria. No name, no standing, no future." "He has me," I said, and the room broke. My mother's voice sliced through the air. "Then you have nothing too." The next morning, the punishment arrived. My accounts were frozen. My phone cut off. My bedroom stripped bare. It was not anger, it was deletion. They removed me as efficiently as they would a failed investment. The servants looked away when I walked down the grand staircase with a single suitcase. Ethan was waiting at the gate, his face pale but resolute. I tried to smile though my chest burned. "Guess it is just us now." He took my hand. "That is more than enough." The iron gates closed behind me, sealing my past inside. I told myself I was free. I did not yet understand that freedom without money is only another kind of cage, one made of hunger and hope. The tabloids devoured my fall. Langford heiress elopes with pauper. They turned my love into a scandal and my name into a headline. Reporters camped outside our tiny apartment, flashing cameras as if humiliation were light. My father issued a single statement to the press. Victoria made her choice. The Langford name no longer represents her. That sentence cut deeper than any disinheritance. In a single week, I went from society's darling to its cautionary tale. The women who once drank champagne with me whispered behind manicured hands. The men who once courted me crossed the street to avoid eye contact. The invitations stopped arriving. Even my so-called friends vanished into silence. Ethan tried to shield me from it. He found a small apartment on the edge of the city, a single room, a leaking roof, a mattress on the floor. We called it home because we needed the word, not because it deserved it. I sold my jewelry to pay rent. My designer dresses became donations to second-hand stores. The mirror became an enemy. It reflected someone I no longer recognized. Yet beneath the shame, something hard began to grow, a quiet defiance. Every cruel headline, every pitying glance was fuel. The world wanted me broken. I decided to bend instead. Ethan worked long hours at a repair shop, his fingers blistered and stained with oil. Still, every night he came home smiling, talking about circuits and prototypes. His eyes never lost their fire. "We will make it, Victoria," he said. "Just wait." I wanted to believe him. But when the electricity bill came overdue or the landlord banged on the door, belief felt like a luxury I could not afford. Sometimes, when he slept beside me, I would stare at the cracked ceiling and whisper to myself, "You gave up everything for love." A voice inside me would whisper back, "Then make it worth it." There were days when hunger gnawed at both body and pride. I took odd jobs, waitressing, answering phones, even cleaning offices at night. Once, I cleaned a building that bore my family's name on the glass doors. I wiped fingerprints from letters that used to spell my identity. I did not cry. I simply worked, breathing in the irony with every swipe of the cloth. Humiliation has a strange way of transforming a person. It strips away vanity and replaces it with vision. Each insult became a lesson. Each struggle became training. I did not realize it then, but every wound was sharpening me for the day I would return. I was no longer the Langford heiress. I was a survivor learning how to turn ashes into strategy. Time blurred in that small apartment. Seasons came and went, marked not by holidays or celebrations, but by the shifting leaks in the roof and the patterns of light through our single window. I learned to live on little and dream on less. When you have nothing, imagination becomes both your weapon and your wound. I still remember the winter that nearly broke us. The heater failed, and the city froze in silence. Ethan wrapped me in his coat while we sat on the floor beside a candle that flickered like hope refusing to die. We could not afford dinner, so he boiled water and called it tea. He smiled as if it were enough, and for a while I believed him. People talk about poverty as if it builds character. It does not. It strips you bare until you see what is left of your soul when pride is gone. Yet within that raw emptiness, I discovered something fierce, a version of myself that my parents would never have recognized. The girl they had trained to smile and obey had vanished. In her place stood a woman learning to survive by her own mind. Ethan's obsession with his invention deepened. He was designing a new kind of renewable energy converter, small, efficient, revolutionary if it worked. He spent nights sketching blueprints, soldering circuits, burning his fingers on prototypes that failed again and again. I watched him and felt both awe and fear. His dream was consuming him, and our future depended on it. There were moments when I wanted to beg him to stop, to find a safe job, to let go of the impossible. But every time I looked into his eyes, I saw the same spark that had once drawn me to him. I could not extinguish that. Instead, I learned to match it. I began studying business, finance, technology. I read borrowed books and free online courses late into the night. If Ethan was going to change the world, then someone had to make sure the world noticed. That would be me. The transformation was slow, painful, invisible. The world still saw a fallen heiress clinging to a hopeless dream. But within me, gears were turning. The more they doubted us, the sharper I became. The humiliation of my past no longer haunted me, it fueled me. Each memory of my father's cold dismissal became a reason to build something that would eclipse his empire. Then came the day everything changed. It began like any other morning, the same cracked coffee mug, the same worn-out shoes by the door. Ethan left for a meeting with a potential investor, one of dozens that had ended in polite rejection. I kissed him goodbye without hope, only habit. That afternoon, he burst through the door breathless, eyes wild. "Victoria," he said, "they funded it. They are investing. They believe in it." For a second, I did not understand. Then the words sank in like sunlight through ice. Funded. Believed. Reality tilted. I laughed, then cried, then laughed again. We danced in that tiny room as if it were a ballroom, surrounded by peeling paint and broken dreams finally mending themselves. The months that followed were a storm of progress. The prototype worked. Investors multiplied. Ethan's name began appearing in articles and interviews. The company, Hail Dynamics, grew faster than either of us could comprehend. Suddenly, the same people who once ignored us were calling, writing, begging for meetings. We moved into a real apartment, nothing extravagant yet, but clean, bright, and ours. I managed the finances, negotiated contracts, and learned how to read the hunger behind every smiling face in the corporate world. I wore thrifted suits that looked expensive because I carried them with purpose. Success is a mirror, it shows people who they really are. As Ethan's reputation grew, I noticed how they looked at him, not as a man, but as a prophet. My role shifted quietly from partner to strategist. I learned to read silence, to interpret greed, to anticipate betrayal. Ethan remained humble, kind, almost naive. He believed the world was finally fair. I knew better. The same people who once ruined us would come back, dressed in admiration, carrying knives wrapped in compliments. I began preparing for them long before they arrived. Within 3 years, Hail Dynamics became a phenomenon. Ethan was hailed as a visionary. Governments wanted his technology, corporations wanted to buy it. We were no longer struggling, we were ascending. The boy they called poor now had billionaires waiting for his approval. And I, the disowned daughter, had become the mind behind the empire. The first article about me called me the silent force behind Hail Dynamics. I smiled when I read it. Silent, yes for now. The irony was poetic. My parents' company, Langford Holdings, had started declining. Mismanagement, bad investments, whispers of scandal. My father was too proud to admit it publicly, but insiders knew. The empire that once cast me out was beginning to crumble, while mine was just beginning to rise. I did not rejoice. Not yet. Revenge to me was never about rage. It was about timing. And timing, like fortune, rewards patience. Then one evening, as I was reviewing contracts in our new penthouse, a gold envelope arrived. It was delivered by hand, thick paper, elegant seal, my family's crest embossed on the flap. My pulse slowed as I turned it over. For a long moment, I simply stared at it, tracing the familiar mark that had once been my inheritance. Inside, in graceful handwriting, were the words, "The Langford Foundation requests the honor of your presence at our annual charity gala, hosted by Charles and Eleanor Langford." The date was 1 month away. The location, the Langford estate. My former home. For a while, I only sat there, the letter trembling between my fingers. The universe has a strange sense of humor. After years of silence, my parents were inviting me back, not as a daughter, but as a guest. Ethan found me still staring at the letter. "You do not have to go," he said gently. "I know," I replied, folding the invitation with precision. "But I will." That night, as he slept, I walked to the window and looked at the city below. Its lights pulsed like a heartbeat, steady and endless. I saw reflections of who I had been and who I had become. I thought about the girl who once walked out of that estate carrying nothing but defiance. I thought about the father who erased her and the mother who watched without mercy. I thought about the empire they built on pride, and how fragile pride becomes when confronted with power. The plan began forming in that moment. Not loud, not vengeful, but deliberate. Revenge, I decided, was not about destruction. It was about demonstration. It was not enough to see them fall. They had to watch me rise until the view blinded them. I began studying the guest list. Old family allies, rival magnates, board members, politicians, all the same faces that once whispered about my disgrace. Perfect. I made a few calls, subtle and strategic. By the time the night arrived, they would know exactly who Victoria Langford had become. Ethan, ever the dreamer, believed I was simply seeking closure. I let him believe that. He deserved peace. But deep down, I knew this was not closure. It was coronation. In the weeks leading to the gala, I commissioned a designer to create a gown unlike anything the Langfords had ever seen, black silk threaded with gold, a reflection of night and flame. I bought a diamond necklace, not for vanity, but for symbolism. It once belonged to my mother. I purchased it quietly at an auction where her jewels had been sold to pay off debts. Every detail was calculated, from the car I would arrive in, to the company shares I would acquire in secret before the event. Hale Dynamics had recently partnered with a global firm, one that, unbeknownst to my father, was preparing to absorb Langford Holdings. The paperwork would finalize on the night of the gala. By midnight, their empire would belong to me. Revenge, I realized, is not taken in anger. It is served in silence, with precision, patience, and poise. As the night drew closer, I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back was no longer 20, naive, or afraid. She was 25, powerful, and dangerous. "My name is Victoria Langford," I whispered. "You tried to bury me, but you forgot I am the soil." The night of the gala arrived with deceptive grace. The city shimmered under a crescent moon, unaware that an empire was about to change hands. I stepped into my car wearing the black and gold gown, a storm woven into silk. Every movement felt deliberate, rehearsed, inevitable. Ethan's hand brushed mine gently. "You look like everything they said you would never become," he whispered. I smiled faintly. "Then tonight, let them see it." The car rolled down the long driveway of the Langford estate, the same path I had once walked in tears. The mansion rose before me like a ghost resurrected, all marble and arrogance, every window glittering as if nothing inside could rot. I could almost smell the past in the air, roses, money, and deceit. At the grand entrance, cameras flashed. Guests turned. Conversations faltered. For a moment, the world paused. The disowned daughter had returned. "Victoria Langford," someone whispered. My name moved through the crowd like an electric current. I lifted my chin, calm and cold. Each step across the marble floor was a statement. My heels echoed like gunfire in a cathedral. The orchestra continued playing, but the melody seemed distant compared to the pounding of old memories. I found my parents near the stage, surrounded by guests and photographers. My father's hair had grayed, his smile tighter than I remembered. My mother stood poised, perfect as always, her diamonds reflecting light she no longer owned. When her eyes met mine, her glass trembled. For a heartbeat, I saw something that looked like fear. Then she blinked it away, returning to her rehearsed composure. "Victoria," my father said, voice cool. "I did not expect to see you here." "Then you have not been paying attention," I replied, my tone polite, almost gentle. He frowned slightly, as if trying to place me in the puzzle of his fading power. "You must be doing well," he said. "I hear your husband's company has grown." "It has," I said, letting the silence after the words hang like a blade. "In fact, it grows every second." I turned before he could reply, leaving him suspended in uncertainty. There was still time before midnight, time for him to discover that the company he built was already dissolving beneath him, absorbed by the very empire he once mocked. The night unfolded like theater. Champagne flowed. Music rose. But beneath the glitter, tension hummed. People who once ignored me now sought my attention. They praised Ethan, admired my poise, pretended they had always believed in us. Hypocrisy has a smell, sweet, suffocating, unforgettable. At 11:30, the lights dimmed for the Foundation's annual speech. My father stepped onto the stage, applause following like habit. He began with his usual platitudes: legacy, honor, family. The words rang hollow, like coins dropped in an empty fountain. When he finished, the host announced, "And now, a few words from our special guest, Mrs. Victoria Hale." Whispers rippled through the hall. My father's smile froze. My mother's hand gripped the podium. I walked to the stage slowly, the silk of my gown whispering against the floor. Every eye followed. The same crowd that once watched me fall now waited for me to speak. "Good evening," I said, my voice steady, resonant. "It has been a long time since I stood in this hall. The last time I did, I was told I had nothing, no name, no worth, no future. Tonight, I return not as a Langford, but as the woman who learned what power truly means." A hush fell. I let the silence breathe before continuing. "My husband, Ethan Hale, built something extraordinary, a company that now leads the world in renewable energy. Many of you invested in him. Some of you doubted him. And some," I glanced briefly toward my parents, "dismissed him entirely." The air thickened. My father's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I came here tonight not to reclaim anything," I said softly, "but to return something that never belonged to me, your judgment." I paused, allowing the weight of that sentence to settle like dust on marble. Then I added, "As of midnight, Hale Dynamics finalizes its acquisition of Langford Holdings. The estate, the brand, the legacy, everything you once used to define me, will belong to us." Gasps rippled across the hall. My father's face drained of color. My mother's lips parted, but no sound emerged. "I did not come for revenge," I continued, my tone calm and precise. "I came for balance." Applause began hesitantly, then grew into thunder. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed forward. The crowd surged with excitement, but I barely heard them. I looked only at my parents, the architects of my downfall. They stood still amid the chaos, relics of an empire collapsing under its own arrogance. For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. That was the revenge I wanted, not their ruin, but their silence. I stepped down from the stage and found Ethan waiting near the edge of the crowd. He looked both proud and uneasy. "Was it worth it?" he asked quietly. I smiled faintly. "Ask me tomorrow." The night ended in a blur of cameras, contracts, and congratulations. By dawn, the world knew the story. Headlines screamed my name, Victoria Hale takes over Langford Empire. Overnight, the daughter they erased became the woman who erased them. But victory is a strange companion. It sits beside you in silence, heavy with questions. When I returned to our penthouse, I stood before the same window where my journey had begun. The city still glittered, but it felt different now, colder, quieter. I poured myself a glass of wine and watched the first light of morning creep over the skyline. Ethan came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "You did it," he whispered. "No," I said softly. "We did it." He kissed my shoulder, then left me to my thoughts. Alone again, I studied my reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wore victory like armor. Yet beneath the gold and diamonds, I could see the faint outlines of the girl who once stood at these gates in tears. People believe revenge brings satisfaction. It does for a moment, a sharp, intoxicating rush. But once the dust settles, what remains is something quieter. Not regret, but realization. Power cannot heal. It only replaces the wound with a crown. I thought of my parents, not as enemies, but as lessons. They taught me what pride costs. They showed me how fragile love becomes when measured by wealth. In destroying me, they had created someone they could never control. Perhaps that was justice. I lifted the glass one final time, toasting the city below. To those who buried me, I whispered, "Thank you for the dirt. It made me bloom." The sun rose fully then, flooding the room with light. For the first time, I did not feel anger. I felt peace, a quiet, bittersweet peace born of knowing that everything had come full circle. Ethan joined me again, his expression gentle. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now?" I smiled faintly. "Now we build something worth keeping. Not for them, not for revenge. For us." He nodded, and together we watched the city awaken. Somewhere below, a new world was beginning, one that no longer belonged to the Langfords or their rules. It belonged to the people who dared to lose everything and rise anyway. And just like that, my story, the story of disgrace and defiance, of ruin and resurrection, became a whisper in the wind. A warning to those who believe power is inherited. It is not. Power is built in silence, one scar at a time. They cut her off for loving the wrong man. They buried her name, mocked her dreams, and forgot she ever existed. But from the ashes, she built an empire. From heartbreak, she forged a throne. Victoria Langford did not just get revenge. She rewrote the meaning of power. Because sometimes, the sweetest vengeance is not making them fall. It is making them watch you rise. They tried to break her. Instead, they built her. And as the city glows beneath her glass walls, one truth remains unshaken. This was never a fall from grace. It was the rise of fire. This was Victoria's story. The Empire of Silence. The beginning of her legend.